Caitlin! A frontier brain? Ash and Barry exclaim in unison. Looking at her feet, Caitlin nods, and in a small voice that belies her usually proud demeanor, says that she's sorry she didn't tell them earlier. Ash reassures her that he understands, and he's sure she had a good reason, but Barry seems less forgiving, as he scowls that had she been honest, they could have trained together, and she could have helped them prepare for the other battle facilities. Caitlin sighs that this is exactly why she didn't want them to know, because she knew they'd react like this, and treat her differently, when all she wanted was an adventure with friends like every other kid her age. Barry fumes that even so, she should have been open with them if she really does see them as her friends, to which Caitlin protests that of course she does. Ash is the temperate member of the group then cuts in, saying that maybe part of the fault does lie with them for not noticing, when it's kind of obvious in hindsight. Both Barry and Caitlin round on him, and in matching offended voices demand to know what he means. Ash explains that Caitlin's strength alone should have tipped them off, not to mention how she knew all the other frontier brains. In fact, they met her at the exhibition match between their dads, which was invite only, so just being there should have told them that she was someone special. Caitlin sagely nods that it really is their own fault, and Ash goes to apologize, but Barry cuts him off, stamping his feet and waving a hand at Caitlin in an angry declaration that she can't pawn this off on them when she was the one who lied. Furiously, Caitlin retorts that she didn't lie, she just chose not to mention certain important details. From behind them, Dahlia snorts a little in her attempt to suppress her giggles, and this makes Caitlin turn her anger on her fellow brain, sarcastically asking if Dahlia has something to add. Dahlia, however, is all cool grace when she replies that she's just never seen Katie all flustered before. In the old days, she was always so above it all, like everything in life bored her, but traveling with these two knuckleheads has brought out the younger brain's feisty side, and she thinks it's good for her, even if it did mean leaving that goober Derek in charge of the battle castle. Ash then asks Caitlin what exactly the deal with Derek is anyway, with Barry growling that this time he doesn't want any lies. Caitlin scowls back at the blonde that first, like she said before, she never lied, and second, maybe he ought to tone down that attitude, since she can still turn his brains into a puddle, though it's not like he's using them for much right now. As Barry seethes, Caitlin then calmly addresses Ash, telling him that Derek is her butler, and like Dahlia said, she put him in charge of the battle castle when she went on sabbatical. This leaves the boy with more questions than answers, and so he presses on, wanting to know why she went on sabbatical in the first place, and why if Derek works for her, did he try to keep kidnapping her? Caitlin sighs that it would take too long to go into all the reasons, but at the heart of it, she was bored. Both Ash and Barry goggle at this reasoning, so Caitlin elaborates, saying that in her tenure as Frontier Brain, she's only ever lost to two people, Cynthia and Palmer, with even those matches being close calls. And to make matters worse, it was rare for challengers to even take out one of her Pokemon, let alone two, and after so long without a real challenge, battling just sorta lost its appeal, going from something that energized her to a chore that she dreaded. After several months of this, she was ready to quit altogether, but then Argenta suggested that before she throw away all she worked for to become a brain, why not take the opportunity that the battle frontier moving to a new region offered, to embark on a journey and see if she could get that spark back. And so, taking a newly hatched Ralts with her, that was exactly what she planned to do, though first she had to stop off at the exhibition match to inform Scott of her leave of absence and Derek's role as interim frontier brain. Ash then finishes this story himself, saying this was where they met, which Caitlin nods as everything falls into place in Ash and Barry's minds. Well, almost everything. Ash then repeats his prior question about Derek's behavior outside the battle factory in Hearthome City if he's in her employ, and agreed to stand in for her. Caitlin shockingly admits that she doesn't really have an answer. She knows that he disapproved of her shirking her responsibilities when she left, but he's always been a faithful butler, so to act the way he did was alarming. She then adds that perhaps they should head for the battle castle and ask him themselves, which Ash agrees to, while Barry just gives a sullen nod, saying it'll have to be after they visit the Pokemon Center, since his and Ash's teams need healing. Buck wishes them luck on their travels, then informs Caitlin that she better sort out this butler problem she's having, since once he beats Dahlia, he's coming for the castle print next, and he wants his opponent to be at 100%. Caitlin nods, and the trio depart for the Pokemon Center. An awkward silence hangs between the trio as they wait for their Pokemon to be healed, with Barry pacing, while Caitlin and Ash sit across from each other in the waiting room. In an attempt to thaw out some of the frostiness, Caitlin offers to teleport them to the battle castle, but Barry outright refuses, saying she can teleport if she wants, but he's walking. Caitlin teases that it'll be a bit hard since the battle castle is on an island north of Canalave City, but instead of bickering with her, Barry just shrugs that he'll walk there, then take a boat, he supposes, before resuming his silent pacing. This new icy, almost contemptuous anger from Barry seems to sting Caitlin, and so Ash promptly changes the subject, saying that if they're going to Canalave, he'd like to take a detour through Celestic Town. After all, they're gonna have to pass through Mount Coronet one way or the other, and if they take that route, then he can check out the Celestic ruins on the way. Caitlin shakes her head that she doesn't understand what Ash's fascination with dusty ruins is, but she guesses they could take that detour. That is, if Barry's also happy with it. Barry shrugs again, saying they can do whatever they want, seemingly having decided that for Ash's part in assuaging Caitlin's guilt, he now too bears some of her culpability. The next few days are unpleasant to say the least. Barry remains almost as cold as the pelting rain from above, barely saying a word to either of his companions unless it is strictly required. This in turn brings down the rest of the group's mood, and as a result slows their pace to a solemn march, so that it takes them a week and a half to reach Route 210 and get out of the downpour. That night, for the first time since leaving Valstone City, the trio actually make a campfire rather than huddling alone in their tents. Barry remains silent, even when Caitlin backtracks to a nearby cafe to bring them all a hot dinner, and when he is done eating, he departs with his Pokemon to train for the upcoming match at the Battle Castle. In an unexpected moment of vulnerability, Caitlin asks Ash if he thinks Barry will ever forgive her, and Ash says he's sure that their friend will, he just needs time. Ash then adopts a firm but not unkind voice that is clearly picked up from his father, and tells her that what she did hurt Barry more than she might realize, because over their travels, he's really come to care about her. Caitlin looks unconvinced, but Ash reminds her that when Derek came for her, Barry was the first to step up and defend her, keeping going even when he knew he had no chance of winning because she was his friend and he'd never let anyone hurt his friends. So when he found out that Derek wasn't actually a villain, it probably made him feel like an idiot. Like all the heartache he and Empoleon went through was for nothing, and like she and Derek were just toying with him and his emotions as part of some frontier-brained game. Caitlin furiously declares that isn't true at all. She really didn't want to go with Derek, and it truly meant a lot to her that her friend stood up to Derek for her. Ash smiles that he knows, but suggests that maybe there's someone else who needs to hear it. He then faintly tilts his head in the direction Barry stormed off in, and without another word, Caitlin vanishes, leaving Ash alone at their camp. Barry is still angry the next morning, but he is at least not as aloof, greeting Ash and Caitlin before telling them they should get going. He also doesn't walk quite as far ahead of them this time, and this is fortuitous, as had he might not have seen the disaster unfold. Up on one of the rope bridges suspended over Route 210's many waterfalls, a wild Shelgon is hurriedly crossing by itself. However, just as it reaches the center point of the bridge, a fierce wind picks up, rocking the bridge sharply and knocking Shelgon over onto its back. Unfortunately, Shelgon are not known for their ability to get back to their feet when tipped over, and this one is no exception, finding itself rolling back and forth as more gusts rock the bridge. With no safety rope, nor hands to cling on, it is only a matter of time before one such tilt is enough to send the endurance Pokemon tumbling over the edge, and with a heavy splash, it lands in the rapids, bound right for the waterfall. Spotting this, Barry cries out for Shelgon to hang on, and so brings out his Empoleon, climbing onto its back and calling for an Aqua Jet to take them to the top of the waterfall. Barry and Empoleon take flight, and even though the force of Aqua Jet is constantly buffeting him, Barry holds on tight, determined to reach the endangered Pokemon as quickly as possible. However, even that is not quick enough, as Shelgon tumbles over the edge of the falls, bound for the sharp, pointy rocks at the bottom. Without hesitation, Barry leaps after it, wrapping his arm around the flightless dragon and telling it that it'll be alright since he's got it. Unfortunately for Barry, no one has him, as even at top speed, Empoleon's Aqua Jet lacks the acceleration necessary to execute a 90-degree turn and get underneath them both before they are skewered by the stones. Back on dry land, Ash tries to think of a way to help, but is interrupted by a faint pop behind him. Looking back, he sees that Caitlin is gone, only for her to return moments later with another pop, now drenched in water while Barry and Shelgon, also drenched, lie on top of her. Furiously, Caitlin demands to know what Barry was thinking jumping off his Empoleon into a waterfall like that, but the blonde boy bites back that it's called having a heart, something she's probably forgotten all about. Caitlin calls him a jerk, and Barry harumphs away with Shelgon to give it a checkup and make sure Empoleon is alright. As they do this, Ash grins. It may be a long time before things get back to the way they were between them, but at least it looks like his companion's friendship isn't irreparably broken. From here the group pick up their pace, and even manage to make it to Celestic Town by nightfall. As the high winds are still whipping up around them, everyone is relieved to be able to sleep inside a warm Pokemon Center, rather than fight the elements for another night. While getting their Pokemon healed, Barry is revealed to have added Shelgon to his team, though this is not the biggest surprise the trio have in store for them by any means. When they enter the dining area, they spot a pair of familiar faces having dinner together, Brandon and Cynthia. Excitedly, Ash, Barry, and Caitlin rush over to see them, and the pair of adults greet them with large smiles. Caitlin and Cynthia take a moment to catch up, while Ash asks his father what he's doing here. Brandon explains that he's here to check out the Celestic ruins, to which Ash explains that he's here for the same reason. The pair laugh, and then Brandon says that Cynthia's actually agreed to give him a private tour of the ruins tomorrow, so if Ash and his friends want, they can come along too. Ash says he'd love to, while Caitlin replies that she's just happy to have a chance to catch up with an old friend, and Barry adds that while ruins aren't really his scene, he plans to beat both Brandon and Cynthia someday, so it'll be a perfect opportunity to watch them closely. The next morning, the group of 5 meet up outside the Celestic ruins, with Ash and Brandon having spent the night back home in the Battle Pyramid, Cynthia and Caitlin having slept at Cynthia's family home, and Barry having chosen to stay by himself at the Pokemon Center. Cynthia guides them past the Celestic Town Historical Research Center, which guards the entrance to the Celestic ruins, and into the ruins themselves, with Ash growing visibly more excited with each passing step. Brandon remains cool and collected, but a small smile does form at the corners of his mouth when they step inside, and Cynthia, who has known the Pyramid King longest, can tell that he is just as excited as his son. Compared to the vastness of the Selacian ruins, the Celestic ruins are only as big as a tool shed, and only house a single mostly vacant room. For Caitlin and Barry, it is underwhelming to say the least, after how far they have travelled to get here. Though Ash, Brandon and Cynthia's eyes are alight with wonder, thanks to their fascination with history, the trio of archaeology nerds observe each brick of the place as though it were a priceless historical find, before finally making their way over to the back wall, where the only real feature of note resides. A large triangular fresco, depicting a trio of twin-tailed Pokemon floating around a golden sphere. At once, Ash, Caitlin, and Barry are overcome by a sudden swell of vertigo, stumbling for a moment before falling backwards in unison. Brandon catches Ash, while Cynthia grabs both Barry and Caitlin before they can hit the ground. Worry crosses the adult's face as they ask if the kids are alright, and so Ash, Caitlin, and Barry explain what happened, all being surprised at the similarities of their symptoms. However, unlike the other two, Ash has something else to add, telling his dad this is the same feeling he got when they first landed in Sinnoh for the exhibition match. Brandon nods gravely, saying that at the time he had put it down to air sickness, but now he'll have to reconsider. He then goes to ask his son something, but is understandably distracted by the sound of an explosion. Looking up, the group see that something has blown a hole in the roof of the ruins, an act which enrages even Caitlin and Barry for the simple disrespect, though they are not left to wonder about the culprit for long, as moments later a Salamence descends through the hole with a steel-haired woman on its back. Furiously, Brandon demands to know what the woman wants with the ruins, but the woman scoffs that she couldn't care less about some old crypt. She's just here for her Shelgon. Barry protests that she can't be its trainer, since when he threw a Pokeball, he was able to catch it. But the woman says she's not its trainer, she's a Pokemon hunter, and it's her latest quarry. Cynthia gasps that she knows who she is now. She's Pokemon Hunter Jay, the most wanted woman in Sinnoh, to which Jay cackles that she's flattered someone as important as Cynthia knows her name. She then smirks that one day she might have to come after the champ's Garchomp, since what it could make her on the black market would set her up for life. Cynthia snarls that if Jay wants her Garchomp, she can come and get it, bringing her partner out and having it use Giga Impact, which knocks Salamence out of the air and forces Jay to land with a roll. However, this also leaves Garchomp vulnerable for a moment, and so Jay capitalizes on this, aiming a device on her wrist at Garchomp and saying that today is her lucky day. She then opens fire at the helpless Pokemon, but as a beam of orange light flies at Garchomp, a second larger orb of the same color intercepts it, causing both to detonate and leave Garchomp unscathed. Looking around, they all see that during the commotion, Shelgon must have come out of its ball to assist its fellow dragon. Seeing this, Jay leers that it's cute the little shelled Pokemon wanted to help its friend, but it's also not very smart, since now that she's seen the power of its rare Draco Meteor move for herself, she's not going to stop tracking it until it's in her client's hands where it belongs. The 5 heroes call this despicable, but Jay pays them no mind, her eyes only on Shelgon. She then raises her strange wrist device to fire again, but is stopped when with a cry of "No!" Brandon brings out his trio of legendary titans. This gives Jay pause, as with a quick glance she assesses Salamence's condition. Concluding that she cannot take the aces of the Pyramid King and Regional Champion at once, she instead drops a smoke bomb, and as the heroes cover their eyes and mouths, she makes her escape, promising that they will meet again. With Jay gone, and the ruins now the scene of a crime, Cynthia suggests that they should all leave and come back another day. Brandon agrees, and so shepherds the kids outside while the champ goes off to inform Officer Jenny of what just happened. When they are back in town proper, Barry gushes over how cool it is that Shelgon knows a rare move, but Brandon frowns that he thinks the boy paid attention to the wrong part of Jay's little speech. Barry looks confused, and so the Pyramid King reminds him that Jay said she's been tracking Shelgon, which probably means she has some method to keep tabs on it, which could cause trouble down the line. Ash asks if his father means something like a tracking device, and Brandon admits that was exactly what he was thinking, before bending down to inspect Shelgon. As expected, he finds a small transmitter lodged in the tiny gap between Shelgon's face and the edge of its shell, and so after a brief apology, pulls it out and crushes it. Barry thanks Brandon, while Shelgon seems relieved to have the tracker removed at last. Brandon replies that he was just doing his job, before stating that even if Jay can't track Shelgon anymore, she's still not far away, and so if they want to keep it safe, they ought to cover ground as quickly as they can, while avoiding being out in the open as much as possible. For that reason, he thinks it would be wisest if he escorted them to the battle castle in the Battle Pyramid, an offer which Ash eagerly accepts. Caitlin and Barry have no reason to object, and so within half an hour, they are in the air, bound for Caitlin's home. Ash is delighted to be back in his home, but unfortunately there is one thing marring it. The fact that Barry, while acting more like himself, is still clearly angry, and so remains distant from his 2 companions, choosing to spend time alone with his Pokemon in distant corners of the pyramid. It is in one of these that Ash finds Barry, marveling at a series of display cases filled with his and his father's archaeological discoveries. One in particular has Barry's attention, a stone Pokeball with an obsidian button. Ash explains that he and his dad found it shortly before coming to Sinnoh, and the legend has it an ancient king sealed a hoe in there centuries ago. With a hint of annoyance in his voice, Barry asks why Ash and Brandon didn't open it to find out, saying that he thought they were all about uncovering ancient mythical Pokemon. Ash admits that he wanted to, but he and his dad knew that legends have a way of distorting reality over time, and so decided it was too dangerous. Barry scoffs that it sounds like they were just too scared, before saying that in that case, he'll check, but if it really is an ancient Ho-Oh, he gets to keep it. Barry then grabs the stone ball, and though Ash yells at him to stop, the blonde boy has already used his legendary motor mouth to call Ho-Oh out. However, what emerges from the ball is not Ho-Oh, but a bluish-black sludgy aura which slithers out of the ball and onto Barry's hand. Then, like some perverse fungus, it spreads, covering his arm, then his torso, and finally the entirety of his body. By now, Ash's yell has attracted Caitlin and Brandon, and as the brains enter the room, Barry, now coated head to toe in the sinister aura, cackles that he is free at last, in a deep gravelly voice nothing like his own. Putting himself between this intruder and Ash and Caitlin, Brandon demands to know the name of the spirit possessing Barry's body, and it is more than happy to comply. In a raspy cheer, the spirit pontificates that he is the king of Pokelantis, and now that he is in control of a young, strong body, he will lay waste to this land and rebuild his kingdom from the ashes. Ash and Caitlin snap that they won't let him, ordering the king to give their friend's body back, but the king merely cackles that they wouldn't be saying that if they knew this boy's mind like he does. It is his anger at the 2 of them that is granting the king full control, and in a way, he thinks this Barry wants to wreak some vengeance just as much as he does. Ash replies that in that case, why not start with him, saying that as the Pyramid Prince with knowledge of this land in the modern world, he would be a useful ally in the wars to come. The king cocks an eyebrow, asking if Ash would really become his thrall, and Ash replies that he will if the king beats him in a battle. However, if he loses, he must relinquish his hold on Barry and return to the stone Pokeball. The devious king sneers that Ash has a deal, and so the pair proceed to the pyramid's battlefield. Brandon, acting as the referee, announces this will be a single battle, with both trainers choosing their Pokemon at the same time. Ash and the King of Pokelantis nod, and then each throw their Pokeballs. The King chooses Empoleon, having deemed its raw strength to be the greatest of Barry's Pokemon, while Ash puts his trust in Meltan to free their friend. Before Brandon can announce the battle has begun, the King is already on the attack, calling for an Aqua Jet which sends Empoleon flying at Meltan. Meltan responds with a Thunderbolt, and as one would expect, this zeroes in on the giant mass of water coming towards it for catastrophic damage. Empoleon hits the ground hard, and the King howls that this is unacceptable, sending in Shelgon and commanding it to use Incinerate. Shelgon, not realizing that this is not Barry, obeys, belching a fireball which slams into Meltan and sends it into a wall. Brandon calls this tactic disgraceful, and announces that the King is disqualified, but the evil spirit snarls that this battle only ends when he says so. He then adds that he has grown tired of Brandon, and so orders his pair of Pokemon to dispose of him. Shelgon and Empoleon look confused at this, knowing that this order doesn't sound like Barry, but the King shrieks at them to do it or face his wrath. Sweat dropping, Empoleon and Shelgon comply, and so fire Bubble Beam and Incinerate at Brandon. The Pyramid King raises a Pokeball to defend himself, but is pulled away when Caitlin teleports to his side, before transporting them both to the stands, and urging him not to get involved and trust Ash. Brandon nods that he does, and so the pair watch as Ash gets Meltan back to its feet, and urges it to hang strong. He then brings out his Gabite, and grins the King should have said he wanted a double battle, showing that he is not rattled by this underhanded trick. Like the coward that he is, the King is deeply perturbed by this, and so brings out Chatot as well, telling the trio of Pokemon to attack, and not stop attacking until this brat and his Pokemon can't stand. Barry's Pokemon then ready themselves, but Ash doesn't call for a counterattack, instead calling for Barry to snap out of this, since he wouldn't want to hurt him and his Pokemon, no matter how angry he might be. The King sneers that Ash has it wrong, and that is why he will lose this battle in his freedom, because he puts his faith in foolish concepts like friendship rather than power. But Ash snaps back that nothing will ever stop him from believing in his friends, and that's why he knows Barry won't let him destroy them before throwing his arms wide. The King of Pokelantis demands to know what Ash is doing, and Ash grins that he's not going to hurt Barry's Pokemon, so they can attack him if they want, but he and his team are done. His Pokemon then imitate their trainer, throwing their arms wide and leaving themselves completely exposed to any counterattack. The King grins that Ash has just proved himself too stupid to even be a thrall, so now he and his Pokemon will leave this world. He then calls for an attack, and good to his word, Ash doesn't respond. Chatot, Shelgon, and Empoleon begin charging up their strongest attacks, and from the stands, Caitlin and Brandon yell at Ash to do something, but the Pyramid Prince calmly replies that he's already done it, and everything's going to be fine. However, things seem far from fine as the King raises a hand and cries, "Ready, aim, stop!" The final word is not in the raspy voice of the evil spirit, but in Barry's voice, as he yells at the King to get out of his body, or else he'll fine him his entire kingdom. The King's gravelly voice snarls back that Barry is pitiful, but he needs to remember his anger, since it gives him strength. His companions betrayed him, remember? They lied to him, but no one will ever lie to him again when the two of them rule the world. Firmly, Barry replies that they didn't betray him, they made a mistake, just like he did letting this creep in, but now he's fixing his mistake by kicking the King out and letting go of his anger, since if there's one thing he knows about friends, it's that though they may fight, they forgive each other. He then lets out a primal scream which mingles with a furious pained one from the King as the aura coating Barry's body blows off him and manifests into a dark cloud over all their heads. From his seat, Brandon raises the ancient stone ball and with a cry of his own, sucks the cloud back into the orb. For a moment it rattles violently, but then the ball falls still as on the field, Barry collapses. Ash and Caitlin rush over to hold him, and in a weak voice the blonde boy says that he's sorry for everything. Ash and Caitlin say it's fine, since like he said, friends forgive each other. The trio then hug as Brandon approaches them, saying they should get their Pokemon ready, since it's almost time for them to land at the battle castle. Half an hour later, the battle pyramid touches down outside a giant ornate castle, and waiting for them outside is none other than Derek. The normally impassive battle butler is clearly in a flustered state, since as soon as he sees Caitlin, he rushes up to her and drops to one knee, saying that he's so glad she's here and that she received his message. Caitlin with heavy confusion asks what message, her expression quickly becoming one of worry over Derek's demeanour. Derek hastily replies that he sent it to Dahlia that morning, having figured she'd have reached Veilstone by now, before humbly apologising for disturbing her journey so many times, but the matter is urgent. Caitlin now a little testily repeats her prior question of what message. Derek gulps that though he's tried to hold him off in her absence, her brother has taken over the battle castle. Caitlin goes pale as a sheet, and she mumbles a name that Ash and Barry can't make out. She then asks if he's inside now, to which Derek solemnly replies that he is, and he's most likely on her throne. Turning from white to red, Caitlin's expression twists into one of fury as she tells the others to follow her. Whether it is because she is too angry to focus, or simply because she is preserving her strength for what is to come next, Caitlin walks rather than teleports into the castle. Staff have no trouble recognizing their liege, letting her pass without issue, and so Caitlin, with Ash, Barry, Brandon and Derek behind her, storms into the throne room. As Derek warned, a young man sits upon the throne. He is tall and handsome, with long wavy bluish-black hair that covers half his face, and his mouth is curved in a smile. When he sees them, he greets Caitlin with a chuckle that adds layers, but no warmth to his rich, full voice, and he sighs that he should have expected this, since even when Caitlin doesn't want something, she can't stand the thought of him having a Kenshi. Caitlin snaps back that this isn't about that, but the young man asks how is it not? She abandoned this place, but as soon as he stepped in to do her job for her, she came rushing back with that pouty look on her face, like he's somehow the bad guy. Caitlin shoots back that he has no right to that job or that throne, since Scott chose her, not him, to be the frontier brain. But the young man has his counter ready, and asks what right she has to it either when she ran away. Why be so selfish and bogart something that brings her no joy, when they could both be happier if she named him her successor? Then he can run this battle facility like he always should have from the start, and she can keep gallivanting around the region and finding herself or whatever it is she's doing. There is a moment of stillness, in which one would need a knife to cut the tension. Then with a deep exhale, Caitlin answers that there is one reason. Her brother asks what it is, and in a voice full of resolve, she replies, "Because I am still a frontier brain, and it is my duty to defeat any challenger who stands against me, even you, Tobias." And that's where we'll leave things. How will this showdown between siblings end? What will its outcome mean for our hero's battle frontier journey? And why did they suddenly fall ill at the Celestic ruins? Find out as the journey continues.